Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're glad to see you for this. This is our fourth Coming to the Center program, which we do each semester, and which is sponsored by, ta-da, the votaries. I'm going to call on Dana in just a minute. My name is Holly E. Moore, and I'm glad to see both old and new faces here. So before I introduce our speaker, Dana, I'd like to invite you to say something about votaries.
Yes, well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you all for joining us today. The Votaries Alumni Circle is really excited to be able to sponsor this event. First off, I'd like to thank Dr. Parmigiani for being with us today and her willingness to participate in Cherry Hill Seminary's Coming to the Center lecture series. I'd also like to take a moment to thank our members and highlight a few of those members whose level of sponsorship has allowed us to make these lectures freely available for people to come to. That list is Alexander Bomer, Gordon Green, Jeffrey Kiefer, Carol Kirk, Polly Springhorn, and Kirk Thomas. Many thanks to all of you.
And Dana Dirksen.
I didn't want to thank myself.
Thank you. Applause, applause. All right. And I see my good friend from Harvard here. Thank you for being here. So anything else, Dana? All right, great. Then changing view here. With no further ado, let me introduce Dr. Giovanna Parmigiani, and she is currently a lecturer at Harvard Divinity School, but is a scholar of contemporary paganisms with a specialty in paganism in your home country of Italy, and I know is close to publishing a book with Equinox on the one of the subjects that she'll address today. So I'd like to turn over the program for now to Dr. Parmigiani. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Holly, for this introduction, for the CHS and the alumni for inviting me here. And thank you all for wanting to share some of your time with me today. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you very, very much.
Okay. I thought we'd start today by just inviting you to tell us, how did you get interested in contemporary paganisms and what has been your research to date?
Absolutely. So I got into contemporary paganism, I would say, by chance, if you believe in chance. It was not planned, I have to say. I'm an anthropologist, and I was doing my PhD in Toronto, and I had chosen as my field for my field work the southern part of Italy, a region called Salento. And I share the screen just a sec, so I can show you exactly what part of Italy I'm talking about. So it's the heel of the Italian booth, this orange area. And I spent quite a bit of time there doing ethnography on a feminist group and around femicide, so the killing of women by the hand of men for the fact of being women. And of course, as it often happens to anthropologists, you go there, you meet people, you talk a lot, and you make friends, and you get to know the friends and acquaintances and the families of your interlocutors. And throughout the end of my first field work, I realized it was a dimension that belonged to Salento that was not unavoidable, really. And it was linked to its particular music and dance, traditional music and dance called pizzica. And so the way I encountered my first pagan group, and the main pagan group that I actually ended up doing ethnography with, was during a public display, let's say, of this music and dance. I don't know, maybe you are not very familiar to what pizzica and tarantismo is. And if you want, Holly, I can, just give an overview.
Please
about.
do. Yes.
So pizzica is a music and dance that was linked in the past to a phenomenon called tarantismo that has been studied a lot. And you might have encountered this type of images in the past if you are an anthropologist or you have interest in anthropology or folklore. Tarantismo was basically a malaise that was believed to be provoked by the bite of tarantula spiders that mostly women experienced in the past, from the Middle Ages, I would say, even before, according to some, but definitely up until the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s. And this particular malaise was cured through this dance and music called pizzica. There were domestic rituals in the houses of women who were allegedly being bitten by tarantula spiders. There are no tarantula spiders in Salento, so clearly the bite either needs to be from another type of spider or a metaphorical one. So there's a group of musicians that during the day were, a hairdresser or, worked in the fields. By night, there were healers, actually. They went to the house of these women, allegedly bitten by a tarantula spider, that were feeling this strange malaise and were playing, for the whole night. And the tarantates, that's the name of the women bitten by tarantula spiders, were dancing through the night for hours and hours in a row. And I have little videos about the type of rituals that these women performed. And there was one public ritual in Galatina, which is a town in Salento, close to the chapel of St. Paul. Clearly, this tarantismo thing has been syncretized by the Catholic Church and so was associated with St. Paul, probably because of, snakes and the overlapping between, the venom of the snake, the venom of the spider, and the malaise, and then the cure. A particularly important scholar Italian scholar was called Ernesto De Martino. He was the scholar who studies this phenomenon, and he had a very interesting take on what tarantismo meant. And I'm mentioning him because it's very popular, very important, and a key figure of my forthcoming book. He explained the malaise of women as a crisis of presence. Let's say they experienced the threat of not being there, and through this magical ritual of, playing music and dancing music, they were able to reestablish presence. So magic was somehow something healing and something necessary to cope with this crisis of presence, which is something that we all, according to De Martino, experience, and to be able to reintegrate and to was something necessary for our lives. So, saying that magic is something necessary for our lives, it was something, a bit, not really mainstream, 50 years ago. So, but, this Ernesto De Martino, who's very popular today, wrote a number of books, some of them translated in English. And he went there in Salento with an equipe of scholars and a video maker called Mingazzi in 1963, and actually recorded the domestic and public ritual of tarantismo, which is an extraordinarily important document of what was happening, in the 1960s in Italy. So not very many years ago. And I can show you a little bit of what was happening, maybe not right at the beginning, but, showing, this type of phenomenon.
La tarantata si fa ragno.
there you go. Of course, there are a number, this is very long. There are two, you can find it on YouTube actually. There are 2 20-minute videos around this. At the end of the last century, so in the late 1990s, early 2000s, of course, with the modernization of the country, Tarantismo, as known by De Martino, disappeared and became something else, mostly something linked to this, public events, yearly concert, folk music oriented, Notte della Taranta, Night of the Tarantula Spider. So it was popularized, it became neo-Tarantismo, something either used to entertain or to sell for tourists, for the anthropological tourism that after, the published, De Martino published his book, it became, something, one of the attractions actually of Salento. Until and this is how actually I encountered a very long-winded, answer to your question, Holly, but this is how I encountered paganism. I was present among, this group of tourists to this historical reenactment of the ritual of Tarantismo that happened in 2015 in Galatina. So it was a reenactment of the public Tarantismo ritual studied by De Martino that was done by a group of women. You see lots of tourists in the two pictures here, lots of cameras, and there are lots of, stands and sell gadgets and, souvenirs and so on. And I was there, and since I'm chatty and I'm not exactly shy, I approached the protagonist after the ritual, and I invited them for coffee. And I realized that what they were doing was not an act, or well, was not only an act, a kind of performance, but was something that they understood as a ritual, not very different. I learned throughout my ethnography from the type of ritual that they do in private context among themselves. These women are the ones that I call in my book the women of the cerchio, women's circle, and are the protagonists of my research and of my book. And just to show you another small video, I juxtapose, the quality is not ideal, I'm sorry. I juxtapose the images from De Martino's 1963 Mingotti's documentary in black and white that I just showed you, with some of the images of the 2015 historical reenactment, so that you can start to understand how there's a line, a red, thread that connects images of the past and the Tarantismo of the past to images of the present and the Tarantismo of the present. there we go. So as I mentioned, I invited them for a coffee. And then I learned that they had recently introduced pizzica within their rituals, and they were clearly pagans in the way there was reinterpretation of the meaning, spiritual meaning especially, of the pizzica of the past and of tarantismo of the past. Contrary to much of the De Martino things that I mentioned before, without denying them, there was a very spiritual element present in the way the women worked with approached tarantismo, to the point that there was a kind of reinterpretation, of the women of the past, the tarantate, who had been framed as ill, sick, probably mentally unstable in the literature of the past, to considering them as shamans, chosen and bitten by the spider, and therefore teachers. And of course, I learned with time that pizzica, which by the way is the only aspect that keeps the circle together, because every individual member of the circle, of which I am part of today, have their own pantheon, follow their own gods and goddesses and practices, and the only element that keeps us together is actually the dancing or performance or singing or playing of pizzica. And of course, I learned with time that there's a connection between the tarantate of the past and their presence on the land, in the land of Salento, and the sort of practices that the Cerchio is engaging with. So this is how I encountered paganism in my research, and it was super fascinating to me. Just a sec that I renamed the type of pizzica that I found in the Cerchio, spiritual pizzica, as a new development of post, the 21st century pizzica today. So this is, more or less how I encounter paganism. And then I can tell you more about my fieldwork if you're interested, but, I don't want to, being too.
We have a couple of questions about this. Should I share with that?
Yes.
Share that with you now.
I'm opening the chat right now.
Tippy Radonsky asks, do women purposely get bitten in order to heal their lack of presence? Yeah.
No.
And is the white dress symbolic?
Yes, I'm reading the chat. So, CP, no, we don't have any, let's say, any reason to think that the women of the past were bitten by the spider purposely. They were mostly workers in the field, and of course there was a socio-economic situation of southern Italy, in the last century, that wasn't, flourishing economically. There were latifundias, so a big landlord who had lots of peasants who worked for them, underpaid and in a very poor situation, and they perceived it as backwards in terms of economic means and type of education and really life perspectives. So we don't have any information about the women wanting to be bitten. I don't know if there are cases in which being bitten or performing the tarantate was something meaningful for other dimensions. So we don't have records of individual stories or life histories that would tell us, yes, that definitely someone who did that on purpose. I think we tend to think that the bite was metaphorical in many ways. And the white dress, yes, is a sign of purity. As I said, it was very, it was syncretized by the Catholic Church. It was, resonated with the baptism and the white like, you know, the healing aspect of it, and definitely.
Okay, thank you.
As a ritual to heal the woman, does the ritual also heal the community, restore balance to the community? So I'm not sure, in the past, maybe indirectly. This is not the interpretation that De Martino and the main other Tarantismo scholars gave of Tarantismo. Definitely today, yes. The intention of the pagans that I met, who I met and who are using Pizzica within the ritual, our rituals, definitely is aimed at healing themselves and the community. And there are lots of things, if, for example, happening around COVID-19, the world situation, the war, you know, the attacks in France, for example, of a few years ago, the dancing Pizzica to heal the world, or for peace, or to heal the community is definitely one of the practices that I encountered.
Did the people you encountered seem to enter into that ecstatic trance sort of mode?
I did. So when of course. So I will share this. So I'm an ethnographer who never had any ballerina fantasies in my life. I mean, I really encountered this, but of course I need to study Pizzica, and you know, I'm an ethnographer after all. I need to learn how to dance Pizzica. You know, the adage, which is actually a beacon of light for us. You know, you go on the field and you do what people do. And so since the people I was working with were dancing Pizzica, I had to learn how to dance Pizzica. And it's very interesting because I entered into the field work without any biases against paganism or, you know, New Age, or, you know, non-Christian religious and spiritual affiliation and orientations, but I wasn't spiritual at all. I wasn't Christian. I was raised Catholic, but, you know, I didn't go to church. And so I put into brackets a sort of, you know, skepticism or agnosticism that, you know, scholars often have on the field, and I started to do things that, you know, my interlocutors did, including dancing Pizzica, including doing meditations, including, you know, depending on who I was hanging out with, you know, having them different practices. I was invited into different practices, and I started to realize that some of them were especially meaningful to me. And so to the point at a certain point, I entered in field in June, and by January, late January, I thought that the only way for me to be truthful to the ethnographic experience and to the life of the people I was encountering was to allowing myself to go native, so to speak, and therefore to accept the fact that some of the things I was doing were meaningful also for myself. And in fact, I kept some of the practices that I learned in my fieldwork in my own spiritual practice today. So that's why I'm talking about myself. I think it's it's partially an interesting story because, you know, one of the stories of anthropologists who go on the field and then, you know, become native. On the other hand, I think I speak a lot about them and show lots of pictures of our interlocutors, and we have to even up the, you know, put my face and my body also into the picture to avoid the risk, you know, exoticizing them, you know, just putting on their shoulder all the analysis that I do and all the stories that I tell. So I'm showing you this. So during my fieldwork in May, my mother died just after a month after my grandma died. So I had these two very important maternal figures of my life transitioning in the matter of a month. And so the interlocutors, you know, some of the people of the church, some of the friends organized for me a ritual in Salento for me and my mom, for my grief, and for my mom, to allow her and help her to, you know, go towards the light and help her out in her transition. So which they chose actually this nice area that you can see on the Adriatic coast. And then I have a few pictures close to the sea. This was the offerings that we prepared. And I had to go into this vagina-like, you know, entrance in the water and leave that little, you know, offering the little Merkaba, they call it, so chariot vehicle to allow my mother to go towards the light. And then they played some pizzica music for me. And this is me. I apologize, but this is me with some of, actually we'll see some of the person you recognize from the previous video who were dancing with me. And in this particular moment, the blonde-haired woman is channeling something, allegedly, or well, something meaningful to me. She said she would channel some messages from my mom for me. And I show you these videos, a little clips, just to show you how the type of ritual that happens, privately, and how they resonate indeed with what you saw in Galatina, and I showed you about, the reenactment and some of the practices of the cerchio. There you go. So what ecstatic dimension? Yes, it often happened to me to enter into, let's call it ecstatic state of openness towards, the more than human, other than human presences, not necessarily in the same fashion and way of the talentate of the past. Often, and this is an important distinction, the women of the past were framed as, suffering women, and the main dimension of the pizzica, of the tarantismo, was suffering of women. While in the spiritual aspect of tarantismo today, or neo-pizzica, or spiritual pizzica that I encountered in the field, pizzica is used as a way to connect with more than human and other than human presences. So it's not necessarily linked to suffering, it's more linked to healing. Shall I continue with the questions? I'm happy to.
Well, I mean, yes. I was struck, let me just say that I was struck by your comments about going native, because that's such a, I know that my friends in Egyptology, you avoid that. And someone said to me in the past year, if you're Christian, nobody questions your teaching in a religious studies program being a conflict. And so I find it very refreshing to hear you talking about your own experience and how valuable that was.
After all, I'm an ethnographer. I mean, ethnography is, I'm supposed to use my own experiences and my own bodies and minds and feelings and you name it, as an instrument to build up knowledge and to be able to tell stories and to know. So to me, of course, there was a lot of stigma, especially in the past. I agree with you, Holly, regarding anthropologists who went native. I think many more went native than the ones that we know went native eventually, because, you don't have to share it and you can, get away without sharing it. To me, the choice to decide to put my story of going native at the center of my ethnography and book what is a fundamentally political one. I think that we need first of all, it's a power dynamics in the field. I don't want to, tell stories about life of others without putting myself into it. I think it would not be ethically honest to do that. So I don't judge who does not do that, but in my own value system is the only way in which I can ethically engage with the field. And politically also, because paganism, especially in Europe, is not seen as is increasingly being seen as an option, but it's not definitely mainstream. And the experiences we have in the past of paganism in Italy and elsewhere are definitely not, the type of, I would say, left-wing or a fascist ones. And I always said to my friends here in the US that when they're surprised about the links between fascism or white supremacy and the far right, extreme right, and paganism, they're surprised about that. I always thought I was surprised that we're left-wing pagans, right? They're finding a pagan who were not like that, and that's why I was so happy to find this community. And even without thinking on the left and right spectrum, I think it has a very important political implication, giving voice to other possibilities to be in the world that are not often seen and recognized. So,
well, and I had asked you earlier. We are told by our student in Sicily, who's, by the way, for those of you who know her, she's flying home today to Vancouver, so we're really happy about that. But she says that the government there is massing troops, that was her word, on the northern border, just in case, because of the Ukrainian conflict, and that people in the neighborhood were talking about signing up to go fight. I think in their case, pro-Ukraine. So I just wondered about, these potential intersectionalities we have with Pizzica and or similar traditional practices, and the need for healing from trauma. I mean, COVID ravaged Italy. I'm sure there will be an increase in refugees coming there. People in trauma. So I'm wondering if people like this group that you were around will be prepared for that sort of thing. I also know you wrote a good bit about feminism and violence. So talk to us some about that.
No, absolutely. So I didn't know about this information about the troops in the north. And I haven't done any field work, clearly, because it's very, very recent events. But I can comment definitely on how COVID, what happened during the COVID. We are not out yet, but especially in 2020, when Italy was so hit by the problem of COVID and so many deaths and so on. There was a video that went viral of this woman, this pizzica dancer, at the center of the main square of Lecce, which is the main city of Salento, dancing, all dressed in black, and this time dressing to heal the world. And this video was put on YouTube, and it went really viral with commentators from all Europe and beyond. And definitely there's an intention of using pizzica and this type of dance and the history that of this dance, and to broaden up so as to include other dimensions of healing, including the healing of the land. I recently wrote an article that is not out yet. It will be forthcoming. I was accepted for publication, in which I try to explore the connection between exactly what you said. So the dancing of the pizzica, the instability and need of healing, and a particular issue that Salento has with olive trees. And since 2013, allegedly, a bacterium called Xylella fastidiosa is actually basically killing the olive trees of Salento.
Wow.
And there's lots of going on. And what I claim in the article, among other things, that, you know, you cannot really understand the activism around the protection of the trees that's now very, very strong in Salento, without really putting into the picture what are normally called neo-animist approach, that I like to call, you know, relational ontologies with other than human presences. Olive trees are considered as kin in Salento. And of course, you know, political scientists, you know, economists, they don't think about this dimension, because they think, you know, Italy is Catholic, therefore the type of idea about personhood, about, you know, health and, you know, curing and healing should be, you know, aligned with mainstream, you know, Catholic and Western and modern ones, but it is not. Regardless of, you know, the affiliation, there's a strong presence of relational ontologies regarding especially olive trees in this part of the country that, again, connects in a very indirect way the type of work I've been, you know, doing with this particular circle and the community in general.
Which reminds me of your story about the tree at Harvard.
Oh, yeah.
Do you want to stick that in here?
Yes,
it's a great
of course.
story.
Of course, of course. So I'm a lecturer at Harvard Divinity School. And I always ask, you know, it's so weird that you teach, you know, courses on paganism and on magic in a divinity school. And it's true, it's weird and a very good sign, I have to say. But I always tell the story because I owe this job to an oak tree. And this is how the story goes. 3 years ago, HDS decided to renovate the building. And part of the renovation of the building, including, they were very careful about, you know, not impacting you know, the centuries old trees that we have on the property of the divinity school on campus. But one of these oak trees had to be eradicated, fell, in order to be able to make space for some of the renovations. And it was a very beautiful oak tree. So the pagan community of students that was informal there, because, you know, many Unitarian Universalists, many, you know, were just pagans who didn't necessarily have to, you know, express their belonging or spirituality, protested against it and said to the administration that, you know, that oak tree was, you know, a person that had a relationship, a connection with them. And this opened up a very interesting conversation, and the administration, I think, was very good in this, because they realized that there was a pagan community among the students, and they realized that there were other ontologies present on campus rather than, you know, the world religions ones. And the oak tree had to be eradicated, but it was done a ritual before that. It was asked permission to be eradicated. And the student organized, that the administration of the school attended to, including the dean and everything. And since I was there at the SSWR as you know, as a senior fellow at that point, working on paganism, this is how I got the job. Since the administration realized it was a pagan community, they want to teach some courses that, you know, were aligned with the interests of the students. And I think it was a very smart and beautiful move in the midst, you know, of, you know, what it was a very, very good thing. I think it was very wise, very wise. And actually own a little daughter of the tree now, because the student gifted it to me, and she's in my backyard.
Very nice.
Yes. So I owe this job to an oak tree.
Nina, someone has asked if
Yes.
you're no longer showing stuff, if you might like to stop sharing the screen so people
Oh,
can
sure.
see you better.
Yeah, of course.
That was a good idea. There you go. So I'm still interested in the connection of violence and feminism,
Oh, yes.
which you've written about.
Yes, so I wrote about femicide, and I said I was hanging out mostly with feminist women, and nobody from that first ethnographic, well, some of them were, overlapping to the ethnographies, but mostly the two communities were not overlapping.
Mhm.
But the things that I tell, the story that I tell in the book that I published on this topic was that when I started my field work in 2011, femicide was not a word, didn't exist outside feminist environments. And the notion, the world that this word described was not something intelligible. I mean, murders were just murders. Why, murders of women were murders of women, but, they were rubricated under the murder label. And Italy did not have a legislation, actually, that included this specific type of murders as specific type of murders. And so I was lucky enough to be on the field and to witness the, legitimization of this word. So from being a word, femicide, that was not even, on the dictionaries, it became, one of the main protagonists of the news, of, TVs and newspapers. And now everybody talks about femicide. Femicide is a thing. Also in the Italian legislation, they did a law against femicide. So it's a word that appears there. And this is a very interesting thing for many reasons. And I think it has also political implications and linked to the type of research I'm doing now, because more and more Salentinians who have, relational ontologies, and for example, think about olive trees as kin, and are very aware of the connections between our well-being and the Earth's well-being, are starting to talk about terricidio, the femicide of the Earth, in order to be able to find words again and worlds again, and to be able to change how the majority of the nation approaches our relationship between our well-being and the well-being of the Earth. They are capitalizing, I would say, on femicide in order to to open our minds to other ways to understand our being in the world. So I think that indeed the two research are more connected than what it appears at first sight. I'm planning to work on this, but I have not written anything yet.
Okay. So what are your current study interests?
Yes, so something linked to what I just said. So olive trees, the xylella epidemics, how we think about femicide and terricide together, and how relational ontologies are indeed one of the protagonists of current environmentalism in Italy. So this is one line of research. And the other line of research, which is partially linked to the conspirituality article that I published in JAR, is, I think my next book will be something like Magic and Populism in Southern Italy or in Italy. So I would like to explore again the connections between populism of the left and right, and conspiracy theories, and in general magic, differently understood.
Cherry Hill held a joint symposium with the University of South Carolina in 2019 and published those papers on basically this topic, the rise of nationalism and white supremacy in some strains of paganism. And that was called Paganism and Its Discontents.
Yes.
So yes, I found your article very interesting. Maybe, and for those who don't know, that JAR would be the Journal of the American Academy of Religion, which is where I first met you. Might you summarize that article for us?
Yes, of course. So I was here in the US while, COVID spread throughout the world. We were all in lockdown, and Italy, as I mentioned before, was particularly hit by COVID. And I was in connection, with WhatsApp, with Facebook, and Instagram with my friends in Italy and interlocutors. And I noticed that some conspiritualist, let's say, ideas were circulating among them. And since I wanted to know and to better understand why some of the people I met in Salento that I share so much time with and I held in high consideration were, sharing disinformation, basically. I wanted to understand what was going on without, most of the conspiracy theories literature is framed often as either, faulty thinking or paranoia, or some sort of emotional engagement that is not necessarily normal. I was dissatisfied with this narratives about what was happening. And so I started to try to understand why some of my interlocutors were sharing this type of conspiritualist news. And so I came up with a distinction between believing in conspiracies and conspiracy believing. Believing in conspiracy is, really thinking that conspiracy are true. And conspiracy believing is more of the performative, affective aspects linked to adopting conspiracies. So if it's true or false, it's not really what matters. What matters is what adhering to a conspiracy theories or to a group of people who actually follow or share conspiracy theories does in the life of the people I met. And so I found out that this is my thesis, that sometimes it's useful to understand conspiracy theories and the adoption of them as a way to feel part of that community of sense of people who sense, not only understand the world, but sense, experience, participate in the world in the same way. And in the case of my interlocutors, this was what Susan Greenwood would call participatory consciousness. So a magic way to engage with the world. So the truth or falsity of, the news or the information is not as important as, the feeling part of this world. And I think this article opens up to also the possibility of, shifting the question and the type of, interaction we have with friends or, acquaintances or family who are followers of conspiracy theories, shifting of conversation from, you're wrong or right, you have problems or you don't have problems, to, well, if, being seen recognizes this participatory way to engage with the world is what's at stake here, we can find other ways to make, to validate your and our ways to be in the world, and to, as for the Xylella, for example, this, relational ontologies, I can, we can find other ways to, include in the mainstream our way to feel about the world. Yeah, so this is one of the other things I will, keep looking at in the coming years.
It seems to be getting more and more acutely relevant. So I'm glad you're pursuing that. I hear, I have attended several of the lectures that HDS has been holding recently. Do you want to say something about that series? Because it's open, it's
Oh, yes,
free, and
noseology.
our students and faculty may be interested, and other guests here.
No, absolutely. So I teach at HDS. So I teach my courses at the Harvard Divinity School. But affiliated to Harvard Divinity School, there's a Center for the Study of World Religions that this year inaugurating a new initiative, which is called Transcendence and Transformation Initiative. And I am part of it. So within this Transcendence, or TNT, Transcendence Transformation Initiative, I host a series that is called Noseologies, a very, difficult word that, I deal with, ways of knowing that are traditionally referred to as non-rational, but that are important in the lives of many of us, but also in, they have a growing importance in contemporary society. So I invite some scholars, that often scholars that whose work I read with my students, because I like to involve my students as much as possible in this. They can prepare questions, and sometimes they also are part of my conversation. And I have a 1-hour chat, mostly, a conversation like the one that we're having today, with a few questions, lunchtime, either from 12 to 1 on Wednesdays, or from 1 to 2 on Wednesday, Eastern time. Yeah, so we have chats, and we keep you company while you're having lunch, let's say.
And if our people want to join this, I usually share out to our student and faculty lists those announcements, and you can click on a link in there and get added to Harvard Divinity School's Noseology.
They're free
list.
and they are recorded, so you can find the old ones on YouTube. You have to go to the CSWR website.
Maybe you can put that in the chat for us.
Yes, I don't have the website, but this is the Center for the Study of World Religion. If you Google CSWR Harvard, you get there.
CSWR.Harvard at Harvard.
Yes, you just have to Google. I can try to find one for you.
A Center for the Study of World Religions.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Angela.
Great, thank you. We're almost to the close of our hour. I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't suggest that you look at the link in the chat box and consider making a donation to Cherry Hill Seminary, so we can continue our work and continue offering free programming such as this one. Diane, excuse me, says she found an article. Oh, is that
might be mine?
Nina's
Yes.
article? Great.
Yes, I go by Nina normally.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, James.
Thank you very much. I also found that wanted to mention that we have a 4-week class coming up. It starts later this month called, oh no, I'm drawing a blank. I'm trying to juggle too many balls, but it's about ritual and game theory. There we go. The Ritual of Play and Game Design, taught by James Fielder. And I think that is going to be fascinating, and some of you may be interested in that. Let's see. Yes. Do we have any last questions?
Before, can I add something?
Yeah.
So if you want to reach out to me because you have some question that I did not answer to, or you have some more questions, popping in your mind after this ends, please reach out to me. You can find, well, this is my email address. I will be happy to be in contact with you and to answer your questions, or have a chat, or meet you over Zoom, whatever. Please feel free.
G. Parmigiani at hds.harvard.edu. And thank you again. I hear somebody. Is that Rebecca?
No, it's Cynthia. Margaret and I had a similar question that was in the chat.
Okay.
About if you could read that and just briefly, or we can just take it. I can talk with her. specifically linear.
Would you relate this pizzica to ecstatic dance in historical settings, such as Dionysian or Eleusinian, or even charismatic expressions in Christianity? And Margaret added on to that, or to modern sacred dance or sacred circle dance or folkloric circle dances.
Certainly, there are scholars who explore the links between the Dionysian traditions and pizzica. And in fact, there are lots of ostraca, so the remains of vases of, that area of the Italy, by the way, was Greek. It was Magna Graecia, and to the point that still now there are Greek dialects spoken in some areas of Italy, in some area of Salento. So definitely there were found some images of tambourines and women apparently stomping their feet while playing tambourines. Tambourines are one of the main instruments of the pizzica music, and the stomping of the feet is also a characteristic element of this dance. So definitely there's a line of scholars who address this. As for charismatic expression in Christianity, I've not heard about this. I think it would be, I tell some of my students to look into that. A very good idea, especially today. Sacred circle dance, folkloric dances, and dance universal peace. So I can add that. So there's an element of the circle in pizzica, but the circle is not of dancers, is of players or standers by. And pizzica music, I focus today only on the spiritual aspect of pizzica music, but today pizzica music is used in different ways in Salento. The yearly concert that I mentioned before, of course, the spiritual one that I mentioned, but also in just, festivals, instead of, inviting the small town, instead of inviting, the cover band, invites, pizzica groups that play pizzica. And actually, there are lots of dancers of pizzica that dance pizzica just for fun, or to flirt with someone, this kind of things, like every other type of dance. In addition to that, there are also ronde, this is the Italian word for circle, that are used for in Catholic contexts. Let's say I was recently in Salento in October for the festival of St. Francis, and there was a ronda, so pizzica players and dancers that went, basically danced to honor the saint for 4 hours, from 8 o'clock to midnight or over. And there are two dancers at the center of the circle, and the players or the standers by outside. Is a way to honor the saint. So definitely there's other aspects. So sacred circle in the sense of a very local way to understand Catholic devotion. And this is for universal peace. Definitely I heard pizzica in those contexts too.
And I noticed that one of the videos I watched was obviously at a wedding or some private party or something, and people would sort of informally take turns dancing in the center, and then maybe tag off to somebody else.
Yes,
and
this is how ronde works.
Yeah, it didn't seem to matter who you were, how old you were, whether you were a good dancer. But I also noticed that in the old footage that you showed, the archival footage, that all the musicians seemed to be men. Was that just because men happened to be the musicians there, or do you think there was a reason for that?
There was some exception. I know that, for example, there's a very celebrated woman who was playing the tambourine, a woman who died a few years ago, but it's still remembered in archival photos and pictures. There's lots of documentations after the 1960s, lots of ethnomusicologists, anthropologists, ethnographers went there and, tried to record, a version of the songs on the playing. But yeah, mostly there were mostly men. So there's an interpretation of tarantismo that I don't like very much, who interpreted the presence of men who were playing as shamans and the women who were suffering. And I think the women I'm working with are actively, challenging that understanding of, the role of men and women in the traditional Pizzica by, as I mentioned before, reframing the position of the tarantate of the past, the women who were suffering, as the one of shamans who were bitten and therefore were the real teachers,
That's so
But
interesting
differently-
because that was my perception watching the archival footage. Was that was like the trance shaman, and
That
the
was
others were
not-
supporting them. I'm sorry.
That was not the main interpretation. Let's say the one that is correlated. I think it's not the main interpretation even now. But I do think that the women I'm working with and the others, not only women, also men, I encountered, because of course I met, beyond the cerchio, I encountered very many other pagans who belong to other groups, or solitary practitioner, or somehow friends of friends, so I cannot, it's not just the 10, 6, 8, 15 of us, it's way more than that. I think that's I understand how important is reframing the role of women of the past and in the present around Pizzica and tarantismo. I think it's a very important ideological reshaping that needs to be made.
Okay. Any last questions?
So did tarantismo dancing Pizzica? So Diane, did tarantismo dancing to Pizzica music help end the murder of women? No, I don't think it's the two are so directly linked. I wouldn't say that we have high numbers of femicide, and Pizzica is mostly a phenomenon of that particular area of Italy. And I'm here answering another question I think I read before. There are workshops of Pizzica, like, the folk dance aspect of Pizzica also elsewhere in Italy, but the spiritual Pizzica I found only in Salento. And so I wouldn't say, unfortunately, that there's a connection between the fight against femicide and the dancing of Pizzica, not yet, at least. So yeah, I would say that, no, I wouldn't say that for now, but thank you for the question. I think it's very appropriate.
Did any of these ethnographers manage to capture some interviews with women who had experienced this? Like,
well, actually, I met one. I met an older woman, yes, older woman who was about 80 when I met her. And actually, it wasn't my interview. One of the women of the cerchio wanted to interview her, and she asked me if I went with her, and I did. And so I did not ask any question. That wasn't my moment at that point. But I learned that this particular 80 years old woman was many years ago was working in the field, and think that she was bitten by the tarantula spider and had a couple of days of that ecstatic or curing dance. And after that, when she was probably 14 or something like that, and after that, every year for a number of years, she went to Galatina for the yearly festival, yearly ritual, the public one, that, by the way, is held for St. Paul, which is 28, 29 of June, right after the solstice. And she was going there, but she said to me that she stopped going there around the 1980s or something like that, because she felt that the way people were looking at the phenomenon and at the women wasn't, let's say, an inclusive one, was seen more and more with skepticism, and tarantate women was seen, as proofs of the backwardness of the, of the area. That was something that everybody wasn't comfortable with. And so she ceased to be participating in the yearly event. But she told me that every June, and this actually, the daughter confirmed this, that every June is a difficult month for her mom, or for this woman still. That they all know it in family, that June is, the mom can be, a bit more, it's more difficult for the mom, let's say. So even though she doesn't go to Galatina, she has her own way to pay homage to the saint in a private environment, let's say.
Is there a particular saint?
Saint Paul.
Oh, St. Paul.
Oh.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry, I missed that earlier. Huh. And does the rest of the country have any connection to Tarantismo?
Well, not now. Maybe in the past, in the area of the Magna Grecia, probably. And there are other dances that can be, thought of, that remains of our dances and music can be thought of like static, but not as in Salento. Salento is the only place in Italy that today has maintained this, this tradition.
All right. Well, I think it's about that time, the magic hour, and we want to thank our speaker, Dr. Giovanna Parmigiani.
Thank you.
Again.
Thank you very much.
I want to thank Votaries Alumni Circle for sponsoring, and each of you who attended. Please visit cherryhillseminary.org if you have questions about the seminary. And we look forward to seeing you at our next Coming to the Center, which is, oops, I forgot to look it up first, but I believe it's in August with Dr. Graham Harvey from the UK. Yeah. So thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Good day.
Thank you very much.
Will you stay on with me for a minute?
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.